Golf world is mourning the death of U.S. Open champion Payne Stewart and 5 others. Now comes the investigation into one of the most unusual incidents in U.S. aviation history.
It's very humbling, there's so much that goes into it. There's so much to say about it. Just thinking about Payne and his legacy and his life and his family, past winners, it's all pretty overwhelming.
He was pathetic. That is what some people thought when Payne Stewart grabbed Phil Mickelson by the face after beating him at the 1999 U.S. Open. But here is the real story. Payne Stewart never hated anyone. The man who became famous for that moment was once arrogant and hard to be around. He was called immature and a genuine pain in the neck. But 5 specific players changed everything. These rivalries pushed him from flashy dresser with an attitude into one of golf's most respected champions. Before we dive deep into this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which rivalry surprised you most. Now let's get into it. The story really starts in 1999. That year changed how everyone saw Payne Stewart. But to understand why those final months mattered so much, we need to look at the pressure that came before. June 1999 at Pinehurst. The final round of the U.S. Open was pure drama. The ground literally shook from the cheers. Phil Mickelson was carrying a pager because his wife Amy was due to give birth the next day. He was ready to walk away from the championship if she went into labor. Stewart had been here before and failed. Just 1 year earlier, Lee Janzen beat him when Stewart had a 4-shot lead going into the final round. Everyone said Stewart could not close the deal. The pressure was massive. On the 16th green, Stewart rolled in a 25-foot double breaking putt to tie Mickelson. 2 holes later on 18, he faced a 15-foot par putt to win his 3rd major championship. He made it. The celebration began. But what happened next mattered more than the trophy. Stewart walked straight to Mickelson. He grabbed his face with both hands. He gave him encouraging advice about becoming a father. The victory happened on Father's Day. Stewart made it about family instead of golf. The image of the champion comforting the man he just beat became more famous than the winning putt itself. This was not the old Payne Stewart. The old version would have celebrated and walked away. Something had changed him. That something was the weight of losing to these 5 players over the years. Just 3 months later in September, Stewart showed again that he was different now. The Ryder Cup at Brookline turned ugly. The American crowds were hostile and unquiet. Colin Montgomery faced foul-mouthed abuse from fans. It got so bad that his 70-year-old father, James, had to leave the course by the 7th hole. He could not stand hearing people scream at his son. Stewart was matched against Montgomery in singles. Years earlier, Stewart had been the loudest American patriot on tour. He played Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA before Ryder Cup matches. He once said European players should not be caddying for Americans. He was known for provoking an entire continent with his comments. But at Brookline, Stewart was appalled by what the crowd did. He intervened multiple times to defend Montgomery from his own American fans. Then on the 18th green with the match and the cup on the line, Stewart picked up Montgomery's ball and conceded the hole and match to him. This act was not about being nice. It was about moral courage. Stewart chose dignity over nationalism in the biggest team event in golf. His transformation was complete. But this version of Payne Stewart did not just appear, it was built through pain and conflict with 5 specific players. Let's go back and see how each rivalry shaped him. Phil Mickelson was the final test, but not the first rivalry. The competition between them built for years. Both were American stars. Both wore flashy clothes and had confidence. But when they faced off at Pinehurst, the stakes were enormous. Stewart had collapsed against Janzen the year before. He needed this win to prove he could handle pressure. Mickelson represented everything Stewart wanted to overcome. The intensity on that final day was brutal. Every putt mattered. Every shot could end the championship. Yet when it was over, Stewart did not gloat or celebrate alone. He immediately connected with the man he just defeated. This showed that he had finally figured out how to be fierce and compassionate at the same time. The rivalry pushed him to be better. The victory proved he could do it. But the moment after the victory proved he had grown beyond just winning. Colin Montgomery represented transatlantic tension. In the early 90s, Stewart was known for his rugged individualism and unbridled patriotism. He separated himself from other players with his clothing and his attitude. He used nationalism to fire himself up for Ryder Cup matches. Fellow professionals said he had trouble making friends because he was so competitive. When he was on the course, it was only to work, not to chat. His focus was singular. This attitude made him effective but isolated. Montgomery was European. He was talented. He was also the perfect target for Stewart's American pride. The 1999 Brookline incident should have been Stewart's moment to crush a rival. Instead, it became his moment to defend one. The fact that Stewart stood up for Montgomery against his own fans showed that he had moved past using rivalry as fuel for ego. He had learned that character mattered more than competition. This would not have been possible without years of Ryder Cup battles that taught him the difference between intensity and cruelty. Nick Faldo was the Cold War of charisma. Stewart was loud, flashy, and outspoken. Faldo was aloof, meticulous, and reserved. In 1990 at St. Andrews, Faldo beat Stewart by 5 strokes to win the Open Championship. Stewart finished as was runner-up. The two men represented completely different approaches to golf. Faldo was the English machine at his peak in the early 90s. Stewart was the American showman who believed personality mattered as much as performance. One famous story highlighted their differences. At the 1990 Scottish Open Pro SM, Faldo finished ahead of Stewart. Faldo reportedly ignored everyone after his round. He walked straight to the scorer's hut, then past kids wanting autographs, heading to the practice range in a frosty mood. Minutes later, Stewart came off the 18th green smiling. He stopped to engage warmly with waiting children. The rivalry was ideological. Stewart's flamboyant patriotism against Faldo's austere professionalism. Stewart used the contrast to define himself. He wanted to be the opposite of the cold European champion. He said things designed to provoke resentment from an entire continent. He wanted Europeans to feel like they should not be caddying for Americans. This was immaturity disguised as confidence. Faldo provided the foil that let Stewart embrace his aggressive American identity. But over time, Stewart realized being loud was not the same as being right. Scott Simpson gave Stewart the spiritual catalyst. The 1991 U.S. Open at Hazeltine came down to a Monday playoff. Both men finished regulation at 6 under par, 4 strokes ahead of the next competitor. The final round had been dramatic. Simpson lost a 2-shot lead over the final 3 holes to force the playoff. The conditions on Monday were brutal. Wind, dry, hard, and fast greens made scoring difficult. Stewart won 75-77. His playoff score was the highest winning score in a U.S. Open playoff since 1927. The match went back and forth. Simpson led by 2 with 3 holes left. Stewart made a crucial 25-foot putt on 16 to pull back into a tie. He eventually won, but the real story was what happened after. Stewart had been dismissive of players who thanked God after winning. He once told a Bible study leader named Larry Moody that he wanted to hear someone thank God for losing. After the playoff loss, Simpson congratulated Stewart. Then Simpson used his interview to thank God for the opportunity and for the ability to give his best effort. Simpson was a man of strong faith. He expressed genuine disappointment but also grace. Stewart later told Moody that Simpson's words moved him. This was the spark. The 1991 playoff was an ideological flashpoint. Stewart had wanted faith to look a certain way. Simpson showed him what it actually looked like in defeat. The rivalry truly mattered because it challenged his core assumptions. Simpson was not just a competitor. He was a mirror showing Stewart his own immaturity and lack of depth. Lee Janzen was the fuel for redemption. Janzen beat Stewart twice for the U.S. Open Championship. The first was in 1993, the second was in 1998 at Olympic Club. That second loss stung most. Stewart began the final round with a 4-shot advantage. Janzen staged a dramatic comeback and won by 1 stroke. Stewart's reaction revealed his character refinement was incomplete. He publicly lashed out at conditions. He complained about bad luck when his drive landed in a fairway divot. He criticized the USGA's demanding pin placements. He called one green bordering on ridiculous and declared the pin unfair. This was frustration speaking, immaturity showing through despite his deepening faith. The loss established a narrative that Stewart could not close the deal in major championships. It gave him motivation and doubt. Could he win when it mattered most? The pressure from Janzen's victories haunted Stewart for a year. When he faced Mickelson at Pinehurst in 1999, he was not just playing for a trophy. He was playing to prove Olympic Club was not who he really was. Janzen gave him the humiliation needed to fuel his triumph. Without that experience, the Pinehurst victory would not have meant as much. Stewart needed to overcome those ghosts. There is a strange twist to the Janzen story. After Stewart died in the plane crash in October 1999, Janzen and his wife Bev were deeply moved by the response from Stewart's church community. They met people at Tracy Stewart's home who showed unconditional love and care. The sincerity touched them so much that they joined First Baptist Church. The rival who caused Stewart's greatest competitive frustration found spiritual growth through Stewart's ultimate legacy of faith. This creates extraordinary symmetry. The competition brought pain. The faith brought redemption. Even after death, Stewart's transformation continued to impact the people who knew him. All 5 rivalries revolved around one event, the U.S. Open. Simpson, Janzen, and Mickelson all faced Stewart in this championship. The U.S. Open is known for demanding conditions and intense pressure. It became the persistent crucible that tested and revealed Stewart's character. His ability to overcome frustration and self-doubt was built through repeated failures at this event. When he finally won at Pinehurst, it was not just about skill, it was about maturity. The championship itself shaped who he became. Without the U.S. Open as the stage, these rivalries would not have had the same weight. The early version of Payne Stewart was defined by problems. He came across as remarkably immature in his first years on tour. David Ogren knew him when he was the perfect frat rat. Ogren recognized him as a genuine hard worker and champion, but also conceded he could be a genuine pain in the neck. Stewart's identity was tied to rugged individualism and unbridled patriotism that occasionally manifested as arrogance. His clothing choices were not just fashion statements. Some colleagues viewed them as a conscious attempt by Stewart to separate himself from his peers. He wore knickerbockers and a tam o' shanter to stand out. This blend of flamboyance and strong, sometimes abrasive self-belief led to a solitary professional existence. Larry Rinker said Stewart was so competitive that he had trouble trouble making friends on tour. When Stewart was on the course, his focus was strictly to work, not to chat. He reinforced his image as an intense, singular competitor. This was not a recipe for growth, it was a recipe for isolation. The shift began in the early to mid-90s. Two events involving close colleagues and rivals drove the change. The first was the 1991 playoff with Simpson. The second was watching Paul Azinger battle cancer. Azinger was a close friend and fellow PGA professional. His sincere Christian faith carried him through chemotherapy. Stewart witnessed Azinger's resilience firsthand. It forced him to confront his priorities. He realized there were a lot more important things in life than golf. These interconnected events were essential. A challenge from a rival in Simpson and support from a friend in Azinger shifted Stewart from having functional religion to developing a personal, life-changing relationship with his faith. He became a born-again Christian, his life reordered fundamentally. Golf writers observed his increasing graciousness even in defeat. His losses to Jansen in 1993 and 1998 showed a different man than before. He still got frustrated, but his new priorities were characterized by more time for people, more kindness, and a real and complete love for his family. The competitive sting of various rivalries challenged his inner self-reliance. This paved the way for the profound public acts of character that defined his legacy in 1999. The timing of his death made everything permanent. Stewart died in October 1999. He had reached the apex of both competitive success and personal maturity. His final public acts were the compassionate victory over Mickelson and the moral concession to Montgomery. Both happened within weeks of each other. The intensity of interest in Stewart stems directly from the timing of his death. It enshrined these acts of grace as the irreversible, definitive statement of his character. His death affected the PGA Tour deeply because of the man he had become. He transformed from an often arrogant, individualistic talent into a gracious, family-focused champion. The plane crash locked that image in place forever. The PGA Tour now gives out the Payne Stewart Award every year. It recognizes a player who best shows charity, character, and sportsmanship both on and off the course. This is institutional recognition that Stewart's contribution to golf is defined not by his wins or his distinctive clothing, but by the profound compassion and moral courage he displayed. The award structure proves that his legacy is about values, not victories. So did Payne Stewart hate 5 players? No, he competed fiercely against them. He let ego and immaturity poison some of those early rivalries, but the friction was necessary. Without Simpson, he never questions his faith. Without Jansen, he never finds the motivation to prove himself at Pinehurst. Without Faldo and Montgomery, he never learns to separate nationalism from character. Without Mickelson, he never gets the chance to show that he can be a champion and a compassionate person at the same time. These 5 men were not enemies. They were teachers. They pushed him through fire. That fire forged the gentleman champion we remember today. Stewart's story is about redemption. It is about a man who started as talented but difficult and ended as beloved and respected. The rivalries did not define him. They refined him. The competitive duels were stepping stones toward the values that now carry his name. His final acts of grace toward Mickelson and Montgomery were only possible because of the years of struggle that came before. He learned that winning alone was empty. He learned that character mattered more than trophies. He learned that connection was more important than separation. These lessons came from losing, from being humbled, from seeing his rivals handle defeat and victory with more grace than he initially showed. In the end, Payne Stewart did not hate anyone. He just needed time to grow up. The 5 players in this story gave him that time. They tested him, they beat him, they frustrated him, but they also taught him. And when he finally figured it out, when he finally became the man he was meant to be, those same rivals were there to witness it. Phil Mickelson received comfort from the man who just beat him. Colin Montgomery received dignity from the man who once provoked his continent. These moments define Payne Stewart's legacy. They show that rivalry and respect can coexist. They show that competition can build character instead of destroying it. They show that even someone who starts with attitude problems and isolation can end with grace and connection. If you found this story powerful, leave a comment about which moment hit you hardest. Was it the Mickelson face grab, the Montgomery concession, or maybe the Simpson playoff that started everything? Let me know below. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now. We have more stories like this coming. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.